Hey guys, Rosie here on another Friday. This week, which is week 5, the topic is the GLBTQ community. And if I stumble over GLBTQ a lot, forgive me. Okay, so there's this question, should the T be in GLBTQ? I was talking to Jack about it, and I think that he actually made a valid point. Before, I always wondered why it was there. Because being transgendered is about a gender identity, not about a sexual identity or a sexual preference. In fact, as we all know, being transgendered says nothing about your sexual preference. But I was talking to Jack about it, and he mentioned that it's so important for people who are, participating in the same sort of, striving for rights in the world to stand together. And that trans people, yes, it is a gender identity, but it is, it also has to do very much with sex and gender roles and gender expression, just as often lesbian and bisexual and gay identities do. So I guess I still feel like philosophically there's a divide, but it's important to have the kind of political base that keeps people safe. The second question is there a hierarchy in the community? It's hard for me to tell because the queer community that I've really had a lot of, experience with has a lot of trans people in it and a lot of very genderqueer people in it. And so there really isn't much of a hierarchy, at least my friends who are gay or lesbian, don't think of it as a hierarchy. So I haven't experienced a hierarchy. Probably other people do in other places. Probably other people do in Western Massachusetts. But in my experience, I haven't really. Although definitely I do see sort of across the board the concept that people who identify as bisexual are somehow copping out. So I guess if there's a hierarchy, it would be that bisexual people are sort of low on the hierarchy. In my part, do I consider myself part of the queer community? Absolutely. And I actively seek out a queer community wherever I go. I identify as queer, I have for a long time, and I really don't feel comfortable spending time with people who have rigid concepts of gender expression and roles, etc. So I definitely consider myself part. Most of my friends are very queer, so I definitely live in that little bubble of queerness. Does Jack consider himself part of it? I didn't talk to him about this, but I think he very much does. He and I share a lot of friends. We spend most of our time, in a very kind of queer space in the world. And, he definitely doesn't make himself a political figure, make his body a political statement, but at the same time, I think that he very much considers himself part of the queer community, and he thinks it's really important to foster that. Do I identify more with the queer community than the straight community? Absolutely. In fact, I have a funny story about this. Once Jack and I went out to dinner with a couple of friends. This is on one of Jack's videos, but here it is again. We went out to dinner with a couple of friends who did not know that Jack, they were his friends. I didn't really know them. And they didn't know that Jack was trans. They thought he was a bio guy. And so they assumed I was straight. And I really loved them. They were very cool people. but it made me really uncomfortable. It made me sort of feel like going out on the street and shouting I'm queer. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but you know, it makes me really uncomfortable when I'm perceived as straight. Because I absolutely do not think of my relationship with Jack as a straight relationship. I think of it as a queer relationship. Even if I was with a bio man, I could never have like a straight relationship with him. You know, that kind of normative expression of gender doesn't really fly with me, I guess. So I absolutely identify with the queer community way more than with the straight community. In fact, I don't really identify with the straight community at all. Okay. Did my role change in the community when I started dating Jack? Yes, actually. I have been out and vocally queer for a long time, but when I started dating Jack, that was when other people started assuming it of me. You know, in school, I look like a fairly feminine woman, though I used to look like a total dyke, and then everyone assumed I was gay, but that was just straight out gay. But, you know, for the most part, people wouldn't really assume things about my sexuality at school. But when I started dating Jack, anyone who knew that Jack was trans, which was pretty much everyone, you know, suddenly I was labeled as queer. So that did change it. Also, I was much more accepted in the queer community. Not that I hadn't been before, but just that, you know, the expression of my sort of idea of gender and sexuality wasn't, you know, like solidified in the eyes of other people because I hadn't done a lot of dating. And the dating I did do was like lesbian and gay. It had nothing to do with, or, you know, lesbian and straight, if you want to call it that. So like lesbian and gay. So it wasn't like really queer. And you should know that I consider the word queer different from being gay. So it's sort of an umbrella term, but for me, it has a lot more to do with my concept of gender and how gender shapes the world, and definitely how gender shapes sex as well. But, so anyways, so it definitely did change. I felt like I was suddenly embraced. So even if I hadn't wanted to be perceived as queer, I would have been. I did want to be, so it was a really nice thing for me. But, you know, and then I started making friends with a lot of people who were very queer, genderqueer, or, you know, gender normative, but just consider themselves very queer. And I started realizing that that was really the community that I was comfortable in. So, I guess I have a little more time. Is FTM or MTF more acceptable in my community? I think that it's really differently viewed, especially outside the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts. You know, FTMs are viewed as this, like, serious, like, kind of underground movement, whereas MTFs are really, people still think of them as, like, transvestites and cross-dressers, because, you know, there was a time when they were so, you know, the focus of the world was really, like, on cross-dressers, and that was a very exotic kind of thing, and it was very visible, and so I definitely think that had a lot to do with kind of changing that perception. Anyways, I'm at the end of my time, so I'll sign off now, and I will see y'all next